Hello, everybody. This is the first of our video Cricket Badger podcast. We're doing an England against India test match daily. They're going to be available by audio in the usual fashion as well. But we're live on our Twitter feed, our Facebook and our YouTube as we go through the rest of this series. It's a bit of an experiment today to see how we get on with it. But talking about all things England against India. And joining me today, as per always, are the fan badgers. We have various fan badgers on the Cricket Badger podcast. Some of them are representing England, some of them are representing India, and some of them are a little bit more neutral when it comes to discussing the cricket across the 5-test match series. Obviously, the first test at Trent Bridge was a draw, rather unsatisfactory in the end with the rather damp nature of the weather, but it looks as if the weather forecast for Lords is a little bit finer. And hopefully we get a very good game. We've got a lot to talk about today because there's been a lot happening today. But pleased to say I'm joined, as you can see, by Mark, Neil and Raj to talk about all things India, all things England as we head into the Lord's Test match. Let's start with you, Raj. I mean, you've been watching the news today and it reminds me a little bit about India, India and Australia when they were basically down to almost the third team and still won that series. I'm not saying England are going to win this series with a third team, but we've seen obviously at the start of this series, Ben Stokes was out. We saw Chris Woakes out. Jofra Archer was out. Ollie Stone was already out. And now we've got the injury news with Stuart Broad. He's definitely out of the second test. And Jimmy Anderson, 50-50. It's not a particularly healthy place for England to be in at the moment, is it?
Not a good place for England to be in, but at the same time, if you look at the positive, then India has done that in the Border Gavaskar Trophy, where they had their depleted side and went on to win the series. So if England has to take some inspiration, they have to look at the recently concluded Border Gavaskar Trophy and go with that mindset in this series. And definitely, every adversity, presents with an opportunity, which I think Mark also put out in our WhatsApp group that, it's an opportunity for all these young English players to show that, they are very good at the highest level, and definitely exciting competition. And India would not take these newbies for granted because they present some sort of unknown quantity with them. And Saqib Mahmood is in tremendous form, and even Overton, Ollie Robinson is looking good. So this definitely is an exciting series to watch out for, even with these greats knocking out of injury.
Well, Raj, you're one of our Indian fan badges. Neil is as well. Neil, all kinds of stats coming out about the partnership between Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson today. I think it's 2012 since they last missed or neither featured in a test match for England. I think it's 2007, 14 years ago, since it was actually an enforced situation. I think in 2012 they missed because they were just being rested because it was a dead rubber. Are we seeing the end? Are we getting a bit of a flavour of the end? I mean, we keep talking about Jimmy being 39, Stuart Broad not being too far behind him. Ultimately, we're going to see the end of them. This is a bit of a taste, isn't it?
Potentially, yeah. And it finally gives an opportunity to some of the people who've been waiting in the wings. It seems almost cruel that the first time that both of them are out, then Chris Woakes is also injured because he's been waiting for his opportunity to get a prolonged run with England for a long time. And those two being so good for so long has really stopped that happening. But it's a huge opportunity for the new people. Saqib has been excellent in the white ball games that I've seen him in. I haven't really seen him for Lancashire before. Ollie Robinson has had a brilliant start to his England career. Sam Curran, well, you never know what you're going to get with Sam, but he certainly loves playing against India. And then question of who else? Mark Wood, potentially, especially as a point of difference if Lords is expected to be a little bit slower, a little bit drier. And, well, I mean, the news that Broad's out for the whole series, initially we thought it was just this one game, but the fact that it's that bad means that possibly Wood will come in, and then maybe the next test there's a bit of a break, but there's a lot of back-to-back tests which England are very careful about managing his workload through. So who knows? Craig Overton has been carrying drinks and whatever some of us feel about him personally, has been churning out great performances in the county championship for a couple of years now. He may get a chance. There was someone who said, and it might have been on our group, that it'd be very, very unlikely for either team to play the same attack all the way through. It does seem a shame that it's been enforced, and I think Anderson will be the big loss because he's always been someone that Joe Root can turn to when things aren't going quite right, and seems to be able to magic out a couple of wickets. He did it in Chennai earlier this year. He's done it on numerous occasions in the past. And we saw what happened in the Ashes last time round, where Anderson got injured early into the series, and maybe the attack was a little bit lost in comparison to how it normally is with him out. So it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. One thing that I'm reminded of is that in our preview pod, I noted that it's always the new bowlers that run them up against India.
You made the comment that there was that new, the unknown factor that always scuppers India. Potentially now a few unknowns, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't seen many of these bowlers in recent times. Even Sam Curran doesn't play a huge amount of red ball anymore, and rarely gets a role in the test team. So there won't be that level of background that the analysts can do and help people out. So there may be a lot of learning on their feet for the Indian batters.
Well, Stuart Broad definitely out. Anderson is about 50-50, I think, is it? But I mean, you're not going to mark. If you've got an Anderson at 39, he was 50-50 ahead of the second test match of 5 test match series. Are you going to risk him if he's that doubtful?
Well, Jim Anderson is a very special player, so I think they'll give him every chance to be fit. But if he's 50-50, no, I wouldn't risk him at all when there's no 3 test matches to come. I've got a lot of faith in the bowlers that are going to step up. I mean, personally, I would have liked to see Wood in the side anyway, because I think the pitch at Lords will be slow, it'll be dry.
He's one of the bowlers, Mark, who, I mean, we're talking about 42 days from start to finish of this 5 test match series. As Neil said, we were never going to really see all of the pacemen playing all of the games. And Mark Wood's somebody they're wrapping cotton wool a little bit anyway, but this is the time to feed him on raw meat and shove him out there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the pitch, you need someone with a bit of pace at Lords, I think, with the type of pitch we're going to get there with the sun out. He can reverse swinger at pace. He's a much improved bowler, Wood, than he was a few years ago. So I have no issue with Wood. I would have played Wood anyway instead of Broad, personally. So keeping mood, I think he's ready. I mean, I've watched him at Lancashire. I mean, I'm a Lancashire member. I've watched him develop over time. He's a superb bowler. He can swing it. He can bowl at pace. He can bowl dry if you need him to. He's adaptable. He doesn't get fazed by occasions. And he always seems to be in rhythm. He's one of those bowlers, when he's fit, he just goes out there and plays. He's got a superb action. So when he comes back from white ball to red ball for Lancs, it never seems to affect him in any way, shape or form.
He was somebody, Mark, that we were talking about on our WhatsApp group. At some stage, you were going to have to give him a chance in this series because he's on the plane to Australia, surely, and could feature quite heavily in Australia. He's got that kind of ability that on foreign surfaces, he could be just as dangerous. I think he's added to his pace. I've always been impressed by him, but he looks to have gone up a level this season.
Yeah, I mean, he stayed fit for a couple of years now, and he's maturing as a bowler. I mean, he bowls at Old Trafford, which is a very abrasive wicket anyway, and it's very dry. So he's had to learn how to use his skills to get wickets on those particular tracks. So, and as you say, he's got to be on that plane to Australia because they're going to need somebody like him out there to be able to compete with them. So, it's exciting having these new bowlers. And as you say, I mean, there was going to come a time when Broad and Anderson were going to not play. It's just unfortunate as it looks as though it might be tomorrow, but it's a great opportunity. And as I was saying on the podcast the other night, I'm also pleased that they've actually got a spinner in the side. I'm surprised it's Moeen, but as I said the other the other night. If you go in there with a four-seam attack, they're going to come up short at some point.
We'll come back to Moeen in a second, Mark, because I think there's a few things to talk about with Moeen Ali. But Raj, for India, obviously sitting in their dressing room or their hotel watching this happen and this unfold, coming into a series, they're always going to talk about Jimmy Anderson. They're always going to talk about Stuart Broad, Jofra Archer, Chris Wokes. The list is almost endless of people that are missing from this. Is there a danger for India that they might switch off a little bit and think job done because this is a B team now for England, or they need to stay focused, don't they?
No, I don't think they'll move away from the focus. So they have a tough task ahead, and they know that the likes of Saqib Mahmood, Ollie Robinson was excellent in the first test. And the kind of depth that England has, I don't think they'll lose focus as such. They would be as focused as they are. But definitely, the likes of Stokes, Anderson, Wokes, and all these frontline English pacers missing out, India would sense a chance of a historic series win.
It's pretty much the frontline pace attack of England is sitting on the sidelines now.
Yeah, absolutely. But, India knows that, they have a task cut out. 4 test matches still to go. Lords is a place, where they have not enjoyed success as much as the other venues in England, especially Nottingham. So definitely they would take one test at a time and see how it goes. And knowing, Virat and his men, they would be raring to go. They would want a sniff at England, and they would want to win against England at Lords especially, and go 1-0 up in the series, rather than focus on, who's missing and who's not playing.
Something to mention to the people watching this at the moment. Obviously, we're used to doing an audio podcast, and today we're doing the video thing as well. But if you make a comment on the Facebook page, the Twitter page, or the YouTube page, I will see it. So if you want to ask any questions or make a comment as we go through today, feel free to. Claire, who is usually a regular on our IPL coverage, says, the first time I've seen your lovely faces, which well, I'm not quite sure how much tongue-in-cheek that is. And she also says that India will refocus, which I think she's quite right with that too. And Neil, they're going to have to, aren't they? I mean, I always thought this was going to be a tight series. In English conditions, I think it is the leveller between these two. In swinging conditions, India are potentially vulnerable. They'll be a little bit aggrieved as well. I mean, England could have quite easily won that first test match, but I think India would have probably thought they were favourites on that final day. Not to be 1-0 up, they'll be a bit aggrieved about that coming into Lords. So they do need to kind of get the mind straight.
I don't think that'll be as much of an issue individually, because there are question marks or poor form behind a lot of our top order. Rohit, it's his second major series abroad. And he got a load of starts in Australia, but didn't really kick on. KL has come in as the 4th or 5th choice opener, and he's got a great start, but he knows that he's got to continue to cement it. Spoken about Pujara, Kohli, and Rahane averaging in the mid-20s over the last year and a half now. I know that we haven't played the volume of Test cricket due to COVID, and also it's a small sample size, but there are those question marks as well. So
do you think
I don't think a lack of focus will be an issue.
Do you think the Kohli, Pujara, to a lesser extent, Rahane slump, if you like, for want of a better phrase? I mean, Virat's averaging less than half of his career average in the last 18 months. Do you think that is down to the pandemic and the bubbles and the pressures that are on players? I mean, Virat's obviously had a child in that time as well. I taken off the ball a little bit with that potentially, but the bio bubbles have always been hard to deal with, and that can lead to a slump, and that's understandable.
I think I mentioned it more in terms of a reduced volume over which we're taking these averages, but Kohli's played a few absolutely blinding knocks. It's just that he's caught root disease and kept getting out between 50 and 100. He looked.
I'll tell you what. I wish a lot of the other English batsmen would catch the root disease. Yeah,
I mean, it's amazing that we used to complain that Joe Root would easily get to 50 and then get out. It's first world problems and all that.
Totally.
But he looked brilliant in Adelaide before he got run out. He scored 2 absolutely masterful 60s or 70s against England. in the last tour where in Chennai we had a huge total to chase and a large time to bat out, and then the pitches fell apart en masse. He's looked good, and getting a first ball against Jimmy Anderson, that quality of ball, it's like when I've spoken about the 36 all out. When it's that good, you don't beat yourself up as much. If you've done something particularly stupid, that's when you start worrying about your technique. And
you could see from Virat's response to that, when Virat gets out early, he kind of looks like he can't believe it. He almost looks like he's questioning the decision, and it riles a few people. But he's just basically in disbelief, isn't he, that he's got out early? And I've said to you before on this podcast that I think that shows his quality, that he was good enough to nick that, because there's that saying, isn't there, that he's not quite good enough to edge that because that's a cracking ball. He was good enough to get the outside edge of his bat on. He's a class act, Virat.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that ball would have got anyone out, especially first ball. I think it'd have got you out if you were already on 120 odd. It was just absolute perfection. And that's something that England will miss. I mean, to bring two balls of that quality against Pujara and Kohli consecutively is something that, however good the support acts as they are at the moment are, then you're going to miss that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the X factor that they've got. The likes of a Jofra or a Jimmy or a Stuart Broad have the ability to change the game, don't they, in 3 or 4 overs, and that's where England maybe are searching for the second string. Mark, let's look to the England 11 potentially in this Lord's Test match. I mean, I did an 11 that I'd heard on the grapevine the other day. Whether it was going to be Bairstow at 3 or Pope at 3, I'm not quite so sure. But it was Sibley out, it was Lawrence out, it was, I can't remember who else was going away, but Burns was in, Hamid was going to open with him, Pope or Bairstow at 3, Root at 4, Pope or Bairstow at 5. And then you had Butler at 6 promoted, Moeen Ali coming in at number 7, then the likes of Jimmy, et al, and the bowlers making up the numbers. But you look at the with Moeen coming in, and there's no guarantee he's going to play. They brought him into the squad. There's no guarantee they're going to play, and they'll look at the pitch first. But with Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad missing out, does that maybe alter the number of changes you ideally want to make as the England selectors? Because you want to try and keep some kind of continuity. Yeah,
it's a difficult balancing act, I think. They want to make some changes to the batting, regardless of whether Anderson and Broad are out, because if you don't get the runs, you ain't going to win the Test match. So they're going to make some changes. I don't think. I think Sibley will keep his place. I do. I think Sibley will keep his place. He'll hang on in there for this Test match. He batted a long time last time. This idea of going around that he likes batting with Root. And I don't think it's fair to either Bairstow or Pope to bat them at 3. Certainly not Pope where he's in his career, and Bairstow should be batting at 5. He started at 5.
Bairstow's got to stay at 5 because you bring him back in, and I always think with Bairstow, he's been messed about. He's gone up and down the order. He's had the gloves and have not had the gloves. He deserves, after 75 Test matches, to have a bit of a run at number 5 to see what he can do with it. And if he doesn't quite crack it, then that might be the end of Bairstow in Test cricket. But if he does, he's definitely got the ability there. With Ollie Pope, though, Mark, Zach Crawley's obviously been opening. He's been at number 3. I know he does that in county cricket, but it's almost like they've asked Zach Crawley to put his big boy boots on and bat in the top 3 and make a fist of it. They'll do the same with Hasib Hamid as another youngster. But with Ollie Pope, they seem to have shielded him further down the order. He bats at number 4 for Surrey. Is it time with Ollie Pope to actually say, you're a batsman, put your big boy pants on now and actually look like a batsman and go up the order?
Personally, I would say no at the moment. He's had quite a few injuries. He hasn't had a lot of cricket. His confidence is relatively fragile. He hasn't had a lot of big scores recently. He could come off a pretty kind of torrid time in India. So I wouldn't put that pressure on him. And I think they should learn from what's happened to Zach Crawley a little bit. And that's the reason I don't think they will drop Sibley tomorrow. I think they'll go with Sibley, Burns, Hamid at 3. and they will put Pope in for Lawrence and keep Bairstow at 5, in my opinion. And I think if England had a functioning opening partnership where you could say, well, at least they're going to bat for 16 overs or 17 overs, you might say, well, I might chance Pope at 3 or I might chance Bairstow at 3, but they could be out there after 5 balls, and it's just they just haven't got that confidence, and I think that's why they'll have Hamid at 3, because Hamid essentially is an opener. He should really be opening. He's an opening bat, but so I think they make 2 changes. I think Lawrence will go out the side. I think Crawley will go out the side. And I think Pope will obviously come in with Hamid, but they will keep him in the middle order. And that, as I think, is the right decision, to keep him in the middle order and get your specialists at the top.
Looking at 2021, Joe Root has scored, I think, 1,064 runs. He tops the charts for all countries at the start of this calendar year. The next best for England is down in the 300s. I think actually Dan Lawrence is second now. Dom Sibley not far behind him in third, but they are a long, long way behind him. And that stat perfectly sums up where England are, doesn't it? I think Dan Lawrence is averaging 27 this season or this year. Dom Sibley's averaging in the low 20s this year. Joe Root's nearly 60. It's just chalk and cheese, and there's so much pressure on. I've got a huge amount of admiration for Joe Root, that he's captaining this side. He goes out to bat and he continues to do what he does because he's getting no help from the other end at all, Mark, is he?
No, I mean, we've spoken about it on previous podcasts, and that's why they brought Ali back into the side, because they can't trust the batting. They're petrified of the top 6 continually failing apart from Root, and that's why Leach can't get a game. If they had a functioning batting order, then Leach would obviously get a game. They wouldn't have brought Moeen back. But they just can't trust the top 6, and obviously Root is doing everything apart from probably even doing the washing up in the dressing room. I don't know, but so yeah. I mean, England's batting. We can talk about it forever, can't we? But it's become a bit of a lottery. It's almost like they're kind of picking bags out of they're picking balls out of a bag at times and just hoping something comes off. I mean, Hamid himself, there's a lot of pressure on that young man tomorrow. I know he scored a few runs for Notts, but they are still taking a bit of a punt on him being back to his best.
Especially when everybody's expecting something from him, because he's been seen as the next in line. He's been seen as the solution to the problem. You know what social media is like. You know how people behave when somebody fails. If Hasib gets out for a low score tomorrow, it'll be, well, he's just the same as everybody else. People will instantly dismiss him, won't they?
Yeah, and you have to look as well. He has got 2 centuries this year. Those 2 centuries came against Worcester in the same game on one of the flattest wickets you could imagine against a Division 2 attack. So we shouldn't be building him up too much. I really hope he goes out there tomorrow, if he gets his goal, and scores a load of runs, because I think when I watched him at Lancs, he was a great player. But we shouldn't be putting too much pressure on the boy, because he's slowly rebuilding his career. And he's going into the firing line at Lords in a second test tomorrow, probably. So, we've got to make sure he gets an extended run if they want to, if they want to get the best out of him.
Yeah, I should always think that. I think it's a massive step up from county cricket to test cricket as well. And you need to give people the chance to kind of get used to the rungs on that ladder. Raj, last time India played at Lords, August 2018, they got absolutely battered. It was a defeat by an innings and 159 runs. They were bowled out for 107 in the first innings, 5 for 20 from Jimmy Anderson. They were bowled out for 130 second time around. Anderson getting another 4 wickets, Broad getting another 4 wickets. There's a common theme as well to the England Stars in that Test match, because Chris Woakes got 137 in England's first innings, 300 odd. They're all missing, as we've already said, but not the happiest of memories for a lot of the players there. The last time they were at Lords, they'll be keen to get rid of that when there's a bit of a monkey on their back.
And as a fan also, I would want to get over that game, because I traveled 1,000 miles from Stockholm just to watch that day. So it was day 3 at Lords, and I think Chris Woakes scored a century, and England was some 100 for 5. And I was elated because Shami got us back into the game. He picked up 3 quick wickets in that session. And then you were just hoping that, India would turn the game over its head. But then, Kuldeep Yadav, I think, played that game, and he had a horrible game. We were surprised about his inclusion in that. Indian test side, especially in overseas conditions. And then it just went down from wrong to wrong. And Chris Woke scored a brilliant century, and India, we got absolutely hammered. I want to erase that memory, especially as well as a fan. But this time, everybody would be keen to go. Kohli hasn't done great in Lords as well. He would also want to get into that honours board as fast as possible. And India has a great chance now that, Broad is out, Anderson is looking 50-50. So they definitely have great chance. They would want to erase the memories of 2018 as fast as possible.
I made a comment on Twitter this morning, Raj, when I knew that Stuart Broad was going to be missing at least this Test match, because his next Test match, whenever it is, will be his 150th Test match. And I said, real shame for him. Obviously, to celebrate at the home of cricket would have been quite special for him. And I still see Lords as very special, despite the fact that ticket prices for this Test match are absolutely obscenely priced. Do you see that as an Indian fan? I mean, I get the impression that overseas teams coming to England always look at Lords and always look at the honours board very favourably indeed. But there does seem to be a growing sort of trend in England that people see it as a little bit snooty and a bit archaic in some of the practices there.
Yeah, but Lords is the home of cricket, and we've grown up seeing the Lords as pinnacle of where every cricketer wants to play in Lords. And especially, you watch, you go to the interiors of India, and you ask any budding cricketer if you want to play Test cricket for India, they would say, yeah, I want to play Test cricket for India and want to represent India in Eden Gardens and especially Lords. So these are historical venues, and every cricketer wants to get their name attached to the honours board. Coming to Broad, it would be unfortunate for Broad that he would not get to play his 150th Test at Lords, but it's he would be presented that opportunity soon, and maybe, you never know, maybe he gets to play his 150th Test in Boxing Day against Australia. So
the Australians will love that, won't they? They'll give him a rousing reception.
Yeah,
it's better than that. If it's the first Test of the Ashes, isn't that at the Gabba where the Brisbane paper printed all those stories after his not walking, and he got so much abuse there? He would love to turn up on his 150th at the Gabba and take a fiver just to rub their noses in it.
I think actually that suits both parties, and the Australians will love to give him begrudging respect and a load of abuse. And Stuart Broad, I think he quite revels in that kind of atmosphere. I think it would probably titillate him a little bit. Neil, when you were a youngster growing up and you had aspirations to be a Test match star, which have obviously faded into the dim, distant past, was Lords special for you?
Old Trafford first, because I joined my secondary school about a year or two after Mike Atherton had left, and he'd been captain there. Old Trafford was the first ground that I went to watch cricket. But yeah, I mean, Lords, MCG, Eden Gardens, they're like the three cathedrals of cricket, aren't they? And if you succeed in each of those, then you've done well with your career. So it would be, it'd be amazing for any player. But then I saw on Twitter someone talking about taking a tour around Lords, and an Indian fan, and the guide asked, who's missing from the honours board, and it's like Sachin, Lara, Callis. You can do all right without quite covering that that little pinnacle.
Moeen Ali, coming back into the side, hasn't played a red ball game since February in Chennai. And this is where my hackles start to rise a little bit. I mean, I'm obviously anti the 100. That's been well documented. But that aside, having an English summer where the 4-day stuff, the Red Bull County Championship stuff, has its last day on the 11th of July, and then a gap before they play again until the 30th of August, when you've got an A-list Test match series against arguably the best side in the world. And Test match cricket is the pinnacle of the game as far as I'm concerned, and I'm sure everybody watching and listening to a various degree would agree with me on that as well. it just seems ridiculous, Neil, that there is no, because we usually go through a summer, or we used to go through a summer. If a batsman was starting to struggle or a bowler was starting to struggle, there would be a James Vince scoring a century for Hampshire, or an Adam Lyth getting 257 for Yorkshire, and they would automatically start to be in the conversation. There's nobody able to do that at the moment because everybody's just coming out the T20 blast, and some of them aren't playing at all, and some of them are in the 100.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's just absolutely shambolic scheduling. What are your thoughts on the 100? And I've got very strong feelings about it. I don't think that there's space for the 4 formats to run separately as Premier competitions, but surely you schedule it so that you're playing like for like domestically and internationally. So if you play the Blast as a feeder development competition to the 100, play them at the same time that England are playing international white ball cricket at home, then when you get injuries, when you get the need for a completely new squad due to COVID, or when someone's just playing so far out their skin in a particular format, they can get called up to the international team and fit straight in because they're already playing that type of cricket. So the Test series should be played at the same time as the County Championship, because as we've seen, I mean, we've got how many, 4, 5, 6 injury dropouts with England,
I mean,
and no one
it's
is
not
coming
just
in
about
ready.
Yeah, it's not just about call-ups either. It's the chance to send Zach Crawley back to Kent and say, get some runs and show us what you can do and get back into form for maybe later in the series, isn't it? You know, you got it. It works both ways. Mark, are we reaping what we sow? Are the ECB reaping what they sow in terms of, obviously, they've brought the 100 in. They want to give it as big a platform as possible, but it's basically meant everything else has been shunted out of the way, isn't it?
Yeah, of course they're reaping what they sow. I mean, you know, the concentration on white ball cricket over the last 5 or 6 years has been immense. You know, the marginalisation of the Championship into April and to September on iffy pitches does nothing to develop young players, because young players need to play on good pitches where they can trust the techniques and develop it. So we're not developing young batsmen, particularly batsmen. The bowlers seem to be getting bowlers through reasonably okay, but of course you read what you sow. You just, you know, you make your priorities, and then obviously everything else follows from that. I think going forward, Root has called for a kind of look at the schedule for next year today.
I'll tell you what, Mark, knowing Rooty a little bit, he knows exactly what he's doing with that interview as well. He isn't the sort of person that chest thumps and bangs his fists on the table. For him to have said that to the press means he feels quite strongly about that. And I feel for Joe Root, Mark, at the moment, because this is a big year for him. We've come off New Zealand series, come off the India away series. Obviously, he did well in Sri Lanka, but this Indian at home, Australia away part of his career as a Test captain is pivotal. It's almost like the defining moments of his tenure as captain. And he's been almost, him and Chris Silverwood are pretty much controlling this Test side with their hands tied behind their back.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's his career, it's his job. So, you know, so obviously he's going to be defined on these if these next 2 series don't go well, he could well leave the post. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, they are leading the side with their hands tied behind the back, but really they do need to use their influence to change that. I mean, Silverwood now is the so-called head supremo, like a football manager in some respects. They wanted that settled. They didn't want Ed Smith and that kind of national selector scenario anymore. They've got what they want in terms of the structure and where they want to organise things. So therefore, they need to use their influence to make sure that we have a structure that is fit for purpose. At the moment, I can't see anything in the near future that's going to change that much, because the 100 with the TV deals is set in stone to run over those 4 weeks between July and August. The counties see the T20 as a phenomenal cash cow. You know, I just bought a ticket to go to the quarterfinal in Taunton to watch Lancashire. It cost me 42 quid. It's a sellout. So it's the massive cash cow for them. So reducing the
Yeah, he has to say what it cost him, doesn't it? He has to. You
Well,
notice that? Yeah.
Well, I said it because it's the amount of money that it generates for the county. So
Yeah.
we're almost in a kind of an existential crisis where I've got no solutions to this going forward because it's all about money.
I mean, we can't have a national outcry. I mean, we're going to come to it. I mean, to be honest, I'm half hoping that England gets stuffed by India and gets stuffed by Australia because it might actually just wake people up. Because I think that's going to happen potentially anyway. And Raj, for a country like England with such a rich tradition in Test cricket, to effectively bookend it and almost ignore it, the Red Bull stuff, it's almost criminal, isn't it?
Looks like, and we also discussed it in the India edition of our podcasts that Joe Root and his men are not getting the 11 they want because of the England rotation policy, and also Morgan being preferred more because of the white ball major tournaments coming ahead for England, where Morgan gets all his resources and Joe Root is left with the little that he can do. It is definitely a little astonishing as to why England has not yet more putting more focus on their red ball game. We all appreciate what Morgan and the entire England setup has done after 2015 when it comes to their white ball side and how they have revolutionized the white ball game. But at the same time, too much emphasis on white ball cricket, has taken their red ball cricket a little backwards. India, on the other hand, has tremendous depth in both white ball and red ball cricket. And, the torchbearer of Test cricket at the moment, Virat Kohli, has too much emphasis on red ball cricket. And he consistently talks about how important it is for India to compete at the highest level, and which is Test cricket, which is the playing of the game.
My favorite thing about Virat, of many favorite things about Virat, and also a few things I moan about Virat as well, but his regular public outpourings about how important Test cricket is. He's massively important, as you say, as torchbearer for the Red Bull side of things, because when he speaks, the ICC extra listen, don't they? Because everybody, millions of people around the world see those comments. Let's round off then. Raj, just a quick question before we round off. Shardul Thakur, who I thought was really good in the first Test match. I thought he came in and bowled a really good tight line and length and probed away and caused problems. Shame to see him missing out. Was it hamstring injury with Shardul? It's a shame that he's not going to be able to back that up with another Test match.
Absolutely, it's going to be a big miss because since we do not have that seam bowling all rounder. Hardik Pandya was with the England side the last time around, and he did well in overseas conditions. So India were looking for some sort of a like for Hardik, where who could be the fourth seam bowling all rounder and could chip in with a few runs with the bat as well. Did perfectly well for the balance of the team, with Jadeja being primarily their batter who could bowl a bit. So in that sense, it would hurt India a bit, but at the same time, there was a lot of outcry before the first Test started that how could you drop the world's best spinner at the moment, and that again brings India back to normalcy, where Ravichandran Ashwin could easily slot in for Shardul's position, and would remove some sort of a headache for selection, where Ashwin would just walk in for Shardul, and India would go on with two spinners, where hopefully it would the pitch would get drier towards the latter part of day 4 and day 5, where India could reap benefits. But other than that, I think that's the only change I see, unless and until Ishant is fully fit and comes back to normalcy. But I would still want, as an Indian fan, I would want India to give Siraj one more test ahead of Ishant, even if Ishant is fit.
Going to go around you twice with a quick question at the end of it. I want to try and keep these to about 40 minutes max if possible. And we're going to run over today, but it's the first one, so who cares? Paul Anderson's been in touch. He says, should we try someone else to replace Sibley, Burns and Lawrence? It's a big question, Mark, but I want you to answer it quickly if you can. Would you go elsewhere for maybe not this next Test match, but would you go elsewhere for the third onwards?
What, for all three of them?
Up to you.
I would certainly not have Sibley in the side, because I don't think he's got the class to be a Test batsman. He's had enough chances. I think Crawley needs to be taken out of the firing line. I think he's got a future in Test cricket. I think Burns, I would keep Burns in the side.
How about you, Raj?
I think I would keep Burns as well. And even though, Sibley, like what Mark mentioned, he struggled out there in the first test as well, and showed tremendous amount of patience. So definitely I would give Sibley one more go.
Neil?
Burns stays. He's by far the best England opener. I'd keep Sibley at the moment because I wouldn't want too much change. Crawley out, and whoever does best out of Duckett and Vince in tonight's game, considering that appears to be the new protocol for getting called up.
Yeah, I always used to say never pick anybody on white ball form, but there's no choice at the minute because there is no red ball form to speak of at all, is there? I personally, I'm really torn with all three of the ones mentioned. Sibley, there is massive positives about eating up balls and staying in there and soaking up and tiring the legs of the bowlers, getting the ball old. But then you also need to score runs at some stage, don't you? Burns has got a lot of fight about him. Lawrence, I think, is one for the future, if not now, one for the future, certainly. Final question, gentlemen, and thank you for joining me today. Who wins the second test match at Lord's, which starts tomorrow, Thursday, in England? Mark, how's it going to go?
India will win the test match.
Raj?
India to win the test match if one of Kohli, Rahane and Pujara get some runs.
Neil?
India. And my apologies to Jack Leach, who's been done over by England by a long way.
I feel sorry for both Jack and Dom, to be honest. Both of the spinners that have been called up into that first test squad who are suddenly leapfrogged by somebody being Jessensons in from the white ball arena seems confused thinking. I can see why they want Moeen Ali because he has that all-round quality to balance the side a little bit, but it does seem to be a little bit unfair on Dom Bess, who's now travelling back to Yorkshire, and Jack Leach, who has looked particularly grumpy in squad photographs over the last 24 hours. I think India as well, I'm afraid. I try and be as neutral as possible and as fair as possible on these podcasts, despite being English. I think England are going to really struggle in this test match at Lord's, and could quite easily see India moving on to the third test match, 1-0 up in the series. Mark, Raj and Neil, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Hopefully out there, well, you continue to enjoy the audio podcast, which will continue to come out there, and you've enjoyed seeing us as well and our ugly faces as we've gone through this this first live one, which seems to have gone at the moment without a hitch, but I've got to turn it off next, so I'm not going to speak too early. But thanks for joining us. We're on every single day as we go through the England against India series. I think we do have a couple of days off between test matches at times just to recharge the batteries, but pretty much every single day all the way through to the end of the fifth test match. Hope you enjoy the cricket, and we'll see you again. I can say see you now as well because we can see you again tomorrow. See you soon.